we're moving along, we know what we can do to sketch or take pictures or engage with some art materials to help us kind of get our ideas flowing um, based on the prompt. So now this next part doesn't necessarily involve taking our sketches and putting them into stitch form. It can take a whole different shape. So in the series and in the Instagram stories that I've shared, I share a piece where I did take literally the first light, and I was using the running stitch and repeated what I call echo stitching, and just taking the shape of the pieces of fabric that I've been stitching together and making almost a landscape with the sun over mountains and some grass. And so I was really thinking about that. The stitch part is really about pausing and letting your ideas just flow. The rhythm of the stitching process allows us to continue that repeated piece and really just kind of keep ourselves busy, setting in place, if you will, and really focusing on the prompts and thinking about, I guess, more about maybe some of the drawings that we had. For example, in mine, you saw I drew my phone with a podcast on there, and I didn't realize just how significant listening to some of those messages in the morning, well, it really impacted the rest of my day and almost set the intention for those. And so I did engage with different pieces. I always have different things going along. Another video that I'll share is kind of a play, kind of a structured play that I'm starting based on a stitch club that I've joined, and it just kind of allows me to take little scraps of fabric and just play around with them and try things out. So sometimes I'll pull out a little piece and it will have nothing to do with the prompt, first light, for example, here. Instead, it'll just allow me time and space to just sit with that. And so that's what this part of the whole process is. It's really about that pause, that whatever's going on with your day, find your sanctuary, your little space, even if it's 5, maybe 10 minutes longer, if you're lucky, or you are intentionally planning ahead, to really sit and engage with that before you get into the journaling piece. So I'll share some of the pieces, and some of the things that I've done that allowed me some space and time. Some things can take longer. Some things I finished, some things I didn't. So this is intended to help you free yourself up from preconceived notions of, I have to have a project. It has to connect directly to the prompt. There's a lot of freedom in this process. It's all about the inner you unfolding, spending some time, and really setting and deepening your understanding about what's going on, what you're trying to tell yourself. And I'm hoping that maybe not this first time in your journaling, we'll walk through the process, but that over time, if you enjoy this process, you'll find your rhythm, you'll find your way into it, and you'll really learn a lot about yourself. So thank you for listening and engaging with this. And now let's look into some examples so that you can kind of find your own access point into this process. So I wanted to go over just some basic things that you'll need for the sewing part. Of course, I have this, now this is a sewing project in and of itself. I just made this little pin cushion because I needed something to travel with me when I sit outside and sew. So some pens sometimes are helpful, some positioning pins, stick pins, just a needle, your favorite size. I am tending to like more thin needles these days, but this one has that. It depends on your thread also. I rarely will use like machine showing or just basic quilting thread, but that's something that you can do. Most of the things that I'm going to be working with are like the pearly size. So it's just a little bit thicker than a a sewing thread that you might put in a sewing machine. There's needles of various sizes. Again, this is just, you see there's like stitching all over here. This was just a rectangle and I stitched other pieces of fabric onto it. And while doing all of this work really allowed me to do a lot of thinking based on prompts or just what I was discovering at the time. And I just sewed in just a couple pieces of felt, and I wish I could say, oops, I think it's upside down even, it's hard to tell. I wish I could say that I labeled them or I understand what needles are in what position, but I actually don't. I did at least when I bought them, put them in here together. So there's more that I have. I have tons of needles, so there's that. I also found this handy guide when I was getting into a tag challenge a couple of years ago. Maybe it wasn't the tag, but it was different 52 stitches. And so I got really inspired. I realized that there was so many stitches that I didn't know. And some of that work will come out in the stitching part of my videos. I'm always going to show you what I'm working on. And so some of these might be handy, but I really love this little guide, Stitches at a Glance. And it's just the size of your hand. You can slip it into a little book or a little bag and just take it with you. And it has, looks like around no, that's the pages. I honestly, I'm not really sure how many stitches there are in there, but those are also handy. So what I wanted to show you now was kind of my response to the prompt in First Light. So I did a couple of different things. Typically in this part of the video, I'll actually do a little sewing and talk about what I'm sewing, what project I'm working on, and then just talk a little bit about the prompt and any resources. So today's going to be a little bit different. But for First Light, I found this piece of fabric, gingham, that I really loved, and I've auditioned some sashiko thread, which I hadn't used, this variegated kind. So I played around with this being kind of like a window and then light coming through here. And the way that it worked out, I had just a little bit of the lighter variant along here as kind of like a natural light. So very abstract. And then I threw it all off by trying to sew some blueberries with a chain stitch going around and around. So this piece I would say is a little bit unfinished. I'm not going to call it a work in progress because I'm not sure I'm going to come back to it. The only thing that I wanted to do was do another line here to make that clear, but this is going to be probably something I'll lay to the side and come back to if I want to. That's totally fine in this process. This is a little bit more literal, and as you can see, hopefully, the sun right up in here, and then this could be snow, or that's what it was whenever I was doing it. It was a very snowy day. If it was a snowy day, we wouldn't have green hills or anything. It's just a layering technique. It was so therapeutic. And in this book, I'm going to share with you in a little while. I'll do it right now. This is something that I'm going to do a separate video on. It's my sketchbook, sketch stitch book. And here's a picture of this. A little trick is that I am actually penning in fabric and then I'm drawing some ideas. This is kind of like the sketch, stitch, and not journal, but just kind of play around. It's encouraging me to explore in my stitching. But here I was, yes, of course, thinking about the sun and the sun's rays, but then I wondered, well, how can I change and alter my stitch patterns to actually show more 3-dimension and change? So I was really playing around with that right here. You can kind of see that in my circular stitches here. And I could explore this a little bit more, but it was really just playing around. And so it gave me time to think about First Light and the habits and routines that I have in place at the time while doing some stitching. So it's a pretty established little piece. And then other things that I work on are like this. This is something that's completely exploratory. There's someone that I follow and on Patreon who taught us about kind of this repeated stitching. Another person was exploring just free, actually it's the same person, free form crochet and what does that look like. So I was exploring that and putting it on here. So crochet, knitting, they're stitching into that. So if that's something that you like, instead of hand stitching, you can of course engage in that. There's no really right or wrong reason, just spending some time with fabric and thread. Something else, if you feel like you want to make a project, I did this back in previous videos if you look at my playlist. This was going to be a monthly stitch project where each square was a month, and it started out that way: January, February, I did March, and in April I put these on here, and that's just it. What you see here, you'll see in a video for week 2, which is quiet spaces. So I was thinking about boundaries when I did this one. But again, this is just, I have some little things that I'm working on, and with the prompt, if one of these sparks something, then I will do that. Right now I'm into making lino prints, carving them out, and then I'm going to sew on here. So this is maybe something you'll see in the future. But this was originally going to be just a scarf, so I've got 12 sections, and I'm going to continue it, but now it's not going to be perfectly in the months of the year. And then before I open my book, I had the same idea of, oh, I'd really like to just have something that I work on in the long term and just add to it over time. And I was into applique, and I think I will come back to this again because I'm discovering the more that I stitch that my own style, my own stitch loves are the blanket stitch, the running stitch, and I love myself a good bullion knot. So not bullion knot, the other one, French knot. I like a bullion knot too, but they're trickier. So this, I just took some fabric that I like. I also really love working with linen. This is not all linen, this is mostly cotton, but it kind of has, to me, a little bit of a linen look. So as you're working through these journal prompts and thinking about stitching, if you don't want to have little pieces and you're not sure you want to kind of conceptualize things, just put together some scraps and just start sewing. Just play around with things. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, now that I've shown you my sewing pieces that I worked on for this particular prompt of First Light, we're going to get into the journal part in just a little bit, and then hopefully in the coming videos I'll put all these sections together into one, and we'll be able to chat together and sew together and do some sketching and really learn a lot about ourselves. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you in the next video.